Hey everyone, and welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave, where today we're going to talk about Book 1 of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, part of an ongoing series. And naturally, the podcast is going to contain lots of spoilers for Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, the wider Tolkien universe, but also, incidentally, A Song of Ice and Fire. So I hope you enjoy listening. So I'm really pleased that today we have a good fellowship of podcasters. I'll ask them to introduce themselves one by one. But first, my name's Bina007 on the forums, and I am joined by EastTexasDirewolf.
Hello, this is Shane, EastTexasDirewolf on the forums.
We have Nadia.
Hi guys, this is Nadia, and today I'll be providing the shocking lack of knowledge.
We also have Eddie.
Hello, I'm Teddard on the forums, Teddard the Blue. I'm not a wizard, I just had an accident with paint pot.
And we have Shellfish.
Hey guys, this is Peter.
And we have Matt.
Hi, this is Matt, Eiffel on the forums.
So I thought that kind of like the obvious classic Vassals way to start off the podcast is to explain, you know, just how we all got into this wonderful book and, you know, whether we've read other stuff in that universe.
All right, well, I read the books when I heard the movies were getting made, so that was back, I guess, around 2001, and read them, loved them. I've read some parts of the Silmarillion, read the Hobbit, I have Unfinished Tales and a few other books that I glance through from time to time, but I haven't read them, you know, cover to cover. I sort of just kind of pick them up and flip through them from time to time.
That's cool. So you've read the Silmarillion, which is more than me.
No, well, just flip through it and read a little bit, not much.
Nadia?
Okay, I read the books I think a couple of years before the movies came out. A friend of mine just recommended it to me, and she said, oh, there are 4 tiny guys trying to destroy a ring. Anyway, I started reading it, and I started with The Hobbit, and then I read the 3 books. So it's been a while, and I haven't read Fellowship again until this week, and I haven't finished it, so I am missing a lot of stuff.
Okay. Eddie?
Yeah, I read it in uni about the time the books came out. Really liked it. I've tried reading Silmarillion, but I gave up and listened to the audiobook instead. So, yeah, so I've done that several times. I've listened to the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings audiobook several times. So, and really into the Tolkien professor. So, hopefully I'm quite knowledgeable.
Yeah, I actually got into the Tolkien professor after you mentioned it on the first Hobbit podcast. I've been listening to some of the podcasts of his. Good stuff. Thanks for mentioning it.
Yeah, no problems.
I did also listen to the audiobook of The Children of Huron, but I couldn't tell you much about
it. For good or bad reasons?
I don't know. It was...
That means bad.
Yeah, I guess so.
Children of Huron is really, really sad.
I remember there was some bandits in the woods, and a lot of mistaken identity, and a lot of crying. That's about it.
That's actually a pretty good summation of the Children of Huron.
Oh,
and a talking sword.
It does not sound like something. It doesn't sound enticing. Put it that way.
So I guess I read The Hobbit. I was 8 or so, and then read Lord of the Rings pretty much after that. It's probably my first print, like fandom kind of thing. That in Star Wars. But Lord of the Rings, I remember the first time reading it, not really understanding half of everything going on. And I've been rereading them, you know, every couple years since. So I've read the Silmarillion once full through. And I actually spend a lot of time on the Lord of the Rings wiki, because I find that's a lot easier to read than the Silmarillion at times. It's really good stories, but it's kind of hard to piece together. So the wiki actually helps.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. I'm glad someone else read them as kids, though. So I read Lord of the Rings first when I was about 11, like and really sick, and I read it all in one go.
Yeah.
And I've been reading it basically once a year ever since. I really love this book. But despite that, and I didn't read The Hobbit till really late, so that's a bit weird. I don't know why. And the Silmarillion, I own it. I find it really hard to get through. I've tried dipping into it, but it's really a struggle. So I know the Lord of the Rings well, but I don't know the wider literature that well at all.
I saw the first movie on my birthday when I was about 10, I think, and then after that I read the books and actually did a book report in school about it, even though I probably didn't understand half of it back then, and it was probably terrible. But also, and read all the other books after that, and The Hobbit too. And when I was about 16, I think I read them in English too. And now, just now, last week, I reread The Fellowship of the Ring. So, and I've also tried to get into Silmarillion, but it usually defeats me about 20 pages in or something, and it's just so dry.
How did it compare reading it were you reading it in Finnish first and then in English? Was it different somehow, or was it a good translation you had originally?
Well, again, it was 10 years ago.
Okay.
Because I don't remember that much, but I'm not sure if it had silly names for stuff. I know that Harry Potter renames a lot of stuff in Finnish in comparison to the English version, but again, I didn't really probably understand the whole story back then on just an account of being young, not my English skills. So
yeah. I almost feel like we should ask Peter to say something in Finnish, because didn't Tolkien believe that Finnish and Welsh were the most beautiful languages, and he also believed that language didn't need to be translated for people to sort of instinctively get what people are saying, which is why.
I heard that actually you talk about Children of Hurin, that Turinbar, he was inspired a lot by a character in the Finnish national epic Kalevala called Kullervo. He has a lot of the same things, but as I could say something in Finnish that I think was voted at some kind of festival to be the most beautiful sentence there, so it was something like Alavilla mailla Hallanvaaraa. That means danger of frost in the lowlands.
Yeah, but just even hearing you say that one name of a character, it just sounds so much cooler than when we say it in English, definitely. Cool. So, I don't know, maybe it's worth talking, not in crude lemon cake rating style, but, today we're talking exclusively about the first two books, and how do people rate them overall, because I certainly know that one of the issues I want to discuss is whether Tolkien kind of just takes too long to get to the point of putting the hobbits on the road. Is The Fellowship in a way one of the more frustrating of the three books, or the 3 volumes, I should say?
I bought the 1-volume edition way back when, and I still got it, and that's how I always kind of viewed it, as just one big, huge book. I just, there's slow parts and fast parts.
Yeah, I guess reading it, I just finished a reread, and going through it, I'm like, man, they're taking an awful long time in the Shire. I also, I guess, thinking about A Song of Ice and Fire, Martin spends a lot of time walking around. If you think about Brienne just walking around and everything, it's kind of similar, and it's a lot of world building. You really delved into the Shire and what hobbits are and everything. And I think it's important for you to understand the nature of hobbits later on, and when it's Return of the King and Frodo has to deal with all of these other trials and tribulations, and you kind of understand that you need someone like a hobbit, not a person, not a man or an elf, to take this on.
Yeah, I think since I'm rereading the books, I'm sort of more looking for cool, nitty-gritty little world-building details and stuff like that. So the action pace isn't really that important to me. I don't notice if it's slow or anything, but I think The Fellowship of the Ring as a book feels more cohesive as a whole than the other ones, because the Fellowship isn't split into POVs like the other books. So, in Two Towers, you get all the awesome stuff in the first half, and then you go back to Frodo and Sam and just more walking.
Yeah, I haven't reread it yet since I read it the first time, but I remember the second part of the Two Towers being really tough to get through, just Frodo and Sam that whole time, much less so than the Shire parts, the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, it's true, actually. It's one of the few things that not one of the few things, but one of the things that the movie can do well is by intertwining them rather than having all the action and the war, and then suddenly more walking, as Peter says. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, like, when you're saying, well, I just read it as one book. That'll be what people in 50 years' time say about Song of Ice and Fire. And they'll wonder what we were all, like, traumatized about waiting for books. Because that's what it was like with Lord of the Rings, right? I mean, it was like sort of 7 years or whatever between each part.
Yeah.
So.
And you didn't really talk to anyone about it either. Like, there wasn't forums or podcasts and stuff, but...
So when I was reading this, it was almost like I was reading it for the first time, since it's been so long. And from what I remembered, it was like Tom Bombadil went on forever, but it wasn't like that, at least on the second time. As soon as, I think, Frodo left Bag End, things started to move pretty fast. So it got a lot better. And after that, it was pretty action-packed.
Also, I didn't read The Hobbit first. I read The Lord of the Rings, and this is the first time I've read The Lord of the Rings since I read The Hobbit. And I'm actually enjoying, hearing about some of the characters, what happened to them after The Hobbit.
That's more to do with the Hobbit movie, I think, than the book, because it's just a good job of, like, characterizing the different dwarves that I now actually kind of feel bad when we find Balin dead and all that.
But from my point of view, I mean, I love all the Tom Bombadil stuff, and I love reading it because I just love that world, but there is a point where you can literally, if you start this in my edition, which is about 1,100 pages long, you can literally start at page 350 and not have missed much in terms of the actual destruction of the ring.
To lose all that stuff in the Shire, I love just inhabiting the Shire. It's such an idyllic place.
It just kind of burns me out in general, all these descriptions of the geography in these books. Like, he feels the need to describe every nook and cranny and every hill and every brook, and it's just, I mean, do we really need this information? I just more prefer the sort of dialogue-heavy segments.
Yeah, all the north, south, east, west stuff, I just, when I start figuring stuff out, my head starts spinning, and then I go like, okay, I don't have to destroy the ring, so I don't need to figure out directions. I have to keep telling myself that. But it gets a little crazy.
Yeah. Do you guys know if Tolkien was like a outdoorsman or something, that he likes to describe these different, like, shapes of the landscape so much, so it's just sort of, he's built such an intricate world that he likes to describe it, or...
Well, he was a philologist, so he studied language, and I think he believed that language is very much rooted in the earth and in the landscape and in the way in which you describe places and names. So, kind of for him, that kind of more walking. I always sometimes feel that he just had all the kind of the cool battles to just justify more walking, because he just wanted to take us for a walk through these landscapes and describe, well, here is this this forest, which was called this by these people, and in the ancient language was called that, and then has become known as this by the other people, and that's what he finds fascinating. And almost...
yeah, that's fine. I'm just talking about directions, All the characters keep switching directions, and it's confusing.
Is it a bit Quaithe-y, a bit kind of to go east, you go west, and...
Yeah, exactly.
It's also, like, someone gave me this beautiful Tolkien map book with, like, all the maps through the ages, and actually had said what is, like, the different kind of distances they're moving. And you realize these guys kind of basically walk about 5 miles in 9 months. I exaggerate. But it's, like, really tiny amounts of distance.
It's kind of crazy how specific he gets on the times. Like, he down to the days, and we were 9 days out of Weathertop.
Yeah,
and
which honestly, like, George R. R. Martin could definitely learn something from him. So with that, do you guys want to just jump in and start discussing? So, we've tried to sort of split up the book into different parts, and the first one was the prologue and basically chapters 1 to 6 of book 1. So I guess that's over to Shane to kind of lead on that.
Alrighty. So we start out with the prologue. We have concerning hobbits, which tells about the nature of the hobbits, which I think we're all familiar with. Good, earthy people. They don't like, fancy machines. They like tools that they can make with their hands. It describes in the Concerning Hobbits that they're broken up into 3 types of hobbits: the Harfoots, the Stores, and the Falahides. Has anyone read anything in any other works about that? Because I haven't, and I was kind of curious to learn more about that, and I don't think there's much information about that.
I think the Harrowfoots are the most common type of hobbit, and most of the Tooks are Stoors, I think, so they were the last people to come to the Shire, and they are, I guess that would account for the more adventurous nature, I guess.
They talked about pipeweed for a while in the prologue, and it says it's probably a form of tobacco, but does anyone really believe that?
Well, if the film's to believe, no.
Right. Okay.
So I thought it was tobacco, I guess, as a kid.
Yeah, I always take it for tobacco.
And then when the movies came out and they were like, oh, it's more medicinal and,
well, they call it pipeweed.
Right.
No, yeah, it's definitely tobacco.
And they blow smoke rings and smoke ships. I guess that's from the movies, but I guess...
No, Gandalf blows smoke rings in the book as well.
Well, I just mean the ship, where he made the ship out of smoke. That was from the movie.
Oh, yeah, that was supposed to be just like.
I guess depending on what kind of weed you're smoking, you can blow all kinds of smoke rings.
I mean, I have to say, I find it really hard to believe that this devout Christian earnest English professor in Oxford was writing about weed, but...
Yeah, that was...
Take it as you will.
But tobacco
that's the big reason against it, I think.
Normal, right?
Because I really doubt Tolkien was, smoking weed. He was of the earth.
Just stronger back then.
At the time, I mean, I don't think either had been really demonized. I mean, was that the time when doctors were recommending tobacco for, like, lung diseases and stuff like that, so I guess that shows in the text.
But he was a pipe smoker, right? So he would gather together with the other sort of writers like Lewis, the Inklings in Oxford, and smoke pipes and drink beer and basically be hobbits and chat about fantasy books, so...
We go on. The next part is the ordering of the Shire, talks about the geography of it, which isn't very interesting, but I do like they talk about what little government there is. They have the Thane, which is, if there was kind of a king, it would be him, who's the head of the Took family, but he doesn't really do any kingly duties. Everyone just pretty much keeps to themselves. They do have the mayor, who mainly presides over banquets and, festivals. And they have a postmaster, and they have the sheriffs, who have a feather in their cap. There's a little nod to the Song of Ice and Fire. And the last part of the prologue is the finding of the ring, which is basically the events of The Hobbit, Bilbo's adventures and finding the One Ring. Do we want to discuss that, or do we all...
Well, I think Eddie wanted to discuss the poem.
Yeah, I just really like Pippin's bath song, and if I could get... When I buy my own place one day, if I could get some bath tiles with that poem on it, I'd put them in my bath.
Oh, that's so cute.
I really love the Shadow of the Past chapter. It has lots of cool stuff, like we get a confirmation that Gollum eats babies.
Yeah, well, I wasn't done with the whole reread. That was just the prologue.
Oh, well, sorry, I was jumping ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, this is Tolkien. We have to be measured and slow. Take our time to get out the shop.
Hey, took a long time writing this stuff down, all right? I got detailed notes. Let's see. Chapter 1, Long Expected Party. We meet Bilbo. Let's see. Bilbo's longevity is discussed. He's an eccentric hobbit. We learn that, let's see, he went on his adventure in The Hobbit, when he was about 40 or 50?
50,
it was around there. Yeah. And we learned that when Bilbo was 99, he adopted Frodo, became his heir. They have the same birthday. And the book pretty much opens as Bilbo's 111th birthday is coming up, Frodo's 33rd birthday. We get a little scene with the gaffer, who is Sam's father and Sam, and we introduce kind of hobbits in their element in a pub, gossiping around, smoking their pipes and drinking their ale, and doing one of the things that I love to hear is hobbits talk shit about each other. They're always
acquaintances, basically.
Yeah. And talking about how queer the folks are over in the other Farling or the South Farling, how they like boats. That stuff is just hilarious to me.
It's kind of weird how they're sort of these idyllic people, supposedly, but then they're really xenophobic too, I mean. So, kind of a contradiction there, but I guess it's endearing xenophobia then.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did anyone catch the reference to an ent? I think Sam said, oh, bloody blah, I swore blind that he saw a tree walking.
Yeah.
He said that sort of tree doesn't grow wherever he was talking about. Let's see. Shortly after that, Gandalf shows up. Bilbo discusses his plans to leave. We have the birthday party. Bilbo makes a big scene, disappears using the ring after his speech. That's a good speech. I like Bilbo's speech in there. I thought Peter Jackson did a pretty good job in the movies of showing that speech. There's some funny lines in there. Gandalf convinces Bilbo to leave the ring. Takes a little doing. Bilbo wants to do it, but he has a hard time doing it. But with Gandalf's help, he does. And it's interesting, I think, as far as I know, isn't Bilbo the only character in the whole series that actually is able to willingly leave the ring?
Yes,
I think Sam does,
Yeah,
but Sam has it.
Bilbo's the only one.
Let's see. We have the first song in the book as Bilbo's leaving. The road goes ever on. Frodo arrives, takes possession of the ring, bag end. Another part that I really liked, I thought was funny, Frodo was handing out the gifts that Bilbo left for his relatives and friends. I thought there's some pretty good jokes in there.
Yeah.
Let's see, and then Gandalf leaves, and that's the end of the long-expected party. Chapter 2, we got Shadow of the Past. Frodo continues to be a bachelor. He lives alone. We're introduced to Merry and Pippi as his friends. People notice that Frodo also is not aging. Rumors and strange going-ons are noticed in the outside world, but the Shire remains pretty much the same. We are reminded that while the evil power was driven out of Mirkwood, which, I guess we're not reminded, really. This would be the first time in anywhere that it's mentioned.
Gandalf doesn't mention in The Hobbit that where he's been. He says, I had an errand, and comes back.
That's so, totally Gandalf. He's such a douche about sharing information.
No.
Let me just, bugger off in the middle of the crisis point of your quest and just do some random errands and come back mysteriously.
The chess master, Gandalf. It does talk about, though, that the power does reappear in Mordor and the Dark Tower is rebuilt. Though, I guess if we read it for the first time, we don't know what all that means. Let's see. Gandalf comes and goes sporadically. He's gone for 9 years before his last appearance, and that is when he tells Frodo about the ring. Like Peter said, it's a really interesting chapter. You get a lot of cool history. And we learn the origin of Gollum, what happened to him. Let's see, and Sam gets busted, and he's told to go on the quest with Frodo.
Like I mentioned, I love that we get that little tidbit about the rumors in Mirkwood that he's preying on birds and chickens, and then it's taking things from cradles, he's eating babies. That's kind of dark.
But he's not actually eating babies, though, is he?
Yeah, probably just chicks or something, baby birds.
It's just a room.
Do you keep chicks in a cradle? I mean...
Yeah, but
Gollum eats babies.
Yeah, it was probably not cradles. I mean, this is Tolkien, not George.
Isn't that just like animalists? He can eat little fishies in the water, no one gives a shit.
He eats goblins,
a cute little chick in a cradle,
I mean, he does eat goblins, and he was going to eat Bilbo. I don't think he has really any scruples about eating babies. I also really liked how Gandalf was like an understated badass in this chapter. He was talking about he had talked to Gollum for 5 days or something, and he was like, then I got tired of shit and I put the fear of fire into him, just mentions that. And later on, Frodo says something like, I could give you the ring, or are you going to take it or something? And Gandalf says something like, well, yeah, I could take the ring, but that would break your mind. That's just
But that's what I mean, Gandalf's such a passive-aggressive little shit. It's yeah, whatever. You do that, see what happens.
Well, Tolkien also had a problem where Gandalf in The Hobbit was a completely different character. If you read The Hobbit by itself, Gandalf, out of the frying pan into the fire chapter, he seems completely lost, and he's not the Gandalf that we see later on in the story. So he's got to figure out some way to transition. So I felt like all this stuff was a way to start seeing those transitions happening. Because if all you knew was Gandalf from The Hobbit, and then you'd be like, oh yeah, you're the guy that shoots fireworks and does a couple magic tricks. You're not one of these amazing guys that's chess master and everything.
Yeah, he sort of makes him into the Scarlet Pimpernel of Westeros, of Middle Earth, because it's
Right.
he puts on this appearance of being the scruffy old wizard. He just does fireworks and teases kids, but actually underneath it all, he's this major political games master, like a Tywin crossed with a Littlefinger crossed with a whatever.
Tolkien also kind of gives some insight into how the ring works. I think when Gandalf says, "I dare not take the ring, because through me the ring would wield too much power," that even the greatest powerful people would succumb to the ring for one thing.
Galadriel talks about that. She has desired that as well, and I guess Saruman has fallen to that sort of temptation already. Although he is not in the physical presence of the ring, it's constantly on his mind, I guess.
And I guess the comic tragic version of that is Smeagol, right? Because it's by taking the ring, because he's a small and petty character, it just becomes the small and petty evil that is created.
Alrighty, let's see. 3 is company. We get the plan to leave the Shire. And Frodo, let's see, he sells back into the Saxville Bagginses. Sacrilege. Terrible. Tragedy. Gandalf arrives in the Shire. He leaves again, tells Frodo he's going to be back soon, and tells him not to tarry too long. But he never comes back. Frodo and company, they eventually have to leave the day after Frodo's birthday, September 22nd. And then, as they're getting ready to leave, that night we have the first appearance of a Black Rider. We get The Road Goes Ever On Again song, and then we start a bunch of pages of walking and traveling, spotting Black Riders. They encounter some elves. We get another song, Snow White.
So you're not a fan of the songs then, Shane?
Some of them aren't bad, but some of them, a little bit goes a long way.
Am I the only one who basically on Reread skips over the songs? I know it's sacrilege and you shouldn't do that.
I do too.
Jesus Christ. I mean, even like the soppy ones about, Loof, whatever, Oh.
Yeah,
I actually read the Hobbit songs, but elf songs I skip.
Elf songs, yeah, because you can't even read them.
Yeah,
I actually,
Hobbit
I
songs
skipped.
are fine.
Sorry. I skipped them, I think, the first time I read them. And so when I reread them now, I do read the songs and I try and sing them. Because I'm always looking for new songs to sing. So
yes, same here.
I'll remember.
Kind of just eyes glazed over and I skipped them when I first read them, but now on this reread I try to make a concerted effort of reading them. I don't know what it is, if it's just a failure of my imagination. I'm not that musical of a person, so I mean when they do that in a film start, it's really cool, the songs, but I mean just reading them on the page, it's just tedious.
Yeah, I agree. Reading songs in a book's not much fun.
Do you do the same with the Song of Ice and Fire books as well?
Yeah, I mean something like The Bear and the Maiden Fair, I just kind of just skim that too, but when they for example, the Rainbow Cast, when they did that on the TV show, my appreciation for the song in the books went up astronomically. I guess it's just imagination then.
Yeah, what I did notice about in this chapter was when the hobbits did start singing the song, like it was a sort of countryside jaunt, sort of hobbit type adventure, something bad usually happens. It's sort of his way of telling you that, nah, this isn't the Hobbit. Something bad shit's gonna happen.
Alright, let's see. And then we have one of my favorite chapters, The Shortcut to Mushrooms. One of my favorite songs also is the poem, Ho 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 to the Bottle I Go. That was actually a good one. I enjoyed that one. Y'all remember that one? I'll recite it here. It's not very long. Ho 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 to the bottle I go, to heal my heart and drown my woe. Rain may fall and wind may blow, and many miles be still to go, but under a tall tree I will lie, and let the clouds go sailing by.
I feel that we need a banjo ukulele for that one.
I know.
We need to have like a Vassals Filks episode where Shane just sings I strum along on my ukulele and we just sing it.
Short and sweet, that's what I like. I don't know about the long ones.
Exactly. He needs this 300-line elven shit. Get to the point.
They did this one on the Golden Dragon in the Fellowship of the Ring, I think.
Let's see, we come upon Farmer Maggot's land. And does anyone, why Farmer Maggot is such a good character and he's really kind of a quintessential, down-to-earth hobbit. Why he gives him the name Maggot? That seems so strange to me.
Yeah, I was wondering that too.
Something different in England? Is there an alternative meaning to it?
What, like a non-Nazi meaning? No.
No, it's maggot.
Maggot is maggot.
Okay.
I mean, usually he gives names that are like pretty much shaped like themselves, like Grima Worm thing, and if he gives like a bad name to a character, it's usually a bad character. But I mean, Farmer Maggot is a pretty cool guy, and he's pretty formidable for a hobbit as well. He goes into the old forest and hangs out with Tom Bombadil too.
Yeah.
His dog's called Grip, Fang, and Wolf.
Oh, the coolest names.
Pippin and Frodo stop there, have dinner. The idyllic dinner, big spread with lots of hands. Although I noticed in this chapter, kind of in the Hobbit, in the Lord of the Rings in the Shire, we pretty much get the upstairs view of the Shire, don't we? We don't really get the downstairs view of it. For us, kind of that upstairs, downstairs thing. Because he's got a bunch of farmhands and stuff, and but we don't really hear much from them. It's Farmer Maggot and Frodo and Bilbo are both explained to being real rich, and Pippin and Merry are both, the heirs to their respective big families.
Yeah, actually, that I wanted to discuss that as well. I mean, Sam and Frodo have a pretty creepy relationship.
Creepy.
They do. There are all these descriptions of Sam sitting at Frodo's feet, and it's just a little disturbing.
But it's just an old-fashioned
master at dinner.
It's just an old-fashioned Victorian master-servant. It's like, Tolkien always described it as being in the army and having an officer, and the officer having a junior soldier who was just going to, make his tea for him and stuff. I think it's
Sam's basically...
living in a country where Batman are still pretty much the norm in the army, and, even the middle class has servants, people to clean their house and wash their clothes and everything. But their relationship is nowhere like that. I mean, it's pretty weird. It takes it a little too far. I mean,
I think you could say it's maybe, there's a lot of, homoerotic fanfic, but I just think it's so sweet. I think it's a lovely, genuine friendship. I mean, Sam's devotion and loyalty to Frodo.
No, actually, there are so many descriptions where, Frodo and Bilbo are walking and Sam is just, walking behind Forgotten. And there are quite a few places where that's, been mentioned. And it just strikes me as a little weird.
Yeah, I agree with Nadia. It takes it a little far, but I think, maybe Tolkien just went a little overboard. I think his heart was in the right place, basically, with that relationship.
Well,
I don't know. It's like Sam is following him around like a little puppy dog.
Well, I mean, Tolkien has called Sam like the true hero of the story, I think, and he's definitely the bravest of the company. And I guess that's sort of class divide thing. I mean, I don't know how prevalent it was in England when Tolkien was writing these books, but I guess you just can't really take today's attitudes and look at them from that lens.
Yeah, I think the historical context is really important, and even when I was up at Oxford, and this is not centuries ago, you had what was called a scout, and the scout came to your room every day, and this is as an undergraduate student, would empty your bin and make your bed and do your washing up and make you a cup of... I mean, it's I think it probably for Tolkien felt very natural, and he just wanted to, subvert it a little bit by having that guy be the guy who's the hero and who ends up with the wife and the kids and the happy ending when Frodo kind of sails off into the west. So I think it's very much of its time, put it that way. I think it's just lovely.
Oh, to make it even creepy for Americans, that sort of relationship in a school like Eton is called fagging.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't going to mention that, because now they're going to think English people are really weird, but...
Really? Now, cigarette in England is a fag, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very diverse use of that word over there.
Isn't it also like a bundle of sticks? I mean, I think in this book we get a few, they threw another faggot on the fire and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bundle of wood. It's also, we have meat faggots as well.
I wonder how it came to be a derogatory term for homosexual in America. Is it a derogatory term for homosexual in England, too, or just America?
Yeah, it's sort of bleeded over from American culture, I think.
I wonder how it came to... went from that to this, That's strange.
It might have stemmed from Palami. It's the sort of special language that gay merchant sailors used, I think, in the 50s.
Oh, what, Polare?
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, this is it. Tolkien would tell us exactly this shit. Being a philologist helps. Okay, so basically it's creepy to everyone who isn't English. fine.
No. See, I'm saying we still have that culture here, but even then it's creepy. Yeah, because we still have Batman. Everyone has servants, unless you're poor, unless you're really, really poor.
Unless you are a servant.
Yeah, exactly. So, but even then, the relationship is not like that. It's more of an employee-employer relationship, whereas here it's more of master and a puppy dog.
But I think that's a crucial difference, because in the modern world, even if you still use the same terminology as Batman, it is a contractual relationship. I pay you, you render a service, and that's it. Whereas at that time, it was so much more about service and duty towards your betters. And so there was a sort of a loyalty and a service that Sam feels towards Frodo that goes beyond just being his contracted paid gardener and mate,
It's different. I think what we were saying before is, there is some class talk about it. Everyone except Sam is an aristocrat, pretty much, Hobbit. But Sam is kind of everyone else's view into the world, almost. And it is, I guess if you look at it from a completely modern sensibility, it does look a little strange. But I really don't see, and I really get upset when people put the homoerotic stuff in there as well. And I just think, it was Tolkien's way of going back to a previous world, to a more romanticized, Victorian relationship.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that sort of not sort of platonic is the right word, but not sexualized love in these books, like the bonds that grow between the fellowship and stuff like that. And it might be, it's become such a, in our time, love pretty much almost exclusively means romantic love, at least in a lot of media.
Yeah.
It's very rare to see.
A lot of that comes from Tolkien's experiences in World War I, right, with his friends, getting killed in the war, which is, the soldiers, the kind of the camaraderie and the love that soldiers have, which they don't use the word love, but I think that's where a lot of that comes from.
But it is a kind of love, isn't it? I think especially in the context of World War I, which is where Tolkien was serving, and, he has that throwaway sentence in the prologue where he just says, this isn't an allegory, but by the way, after World War I, everyone but one of my best friends was dead. And then he just moves on in that classic British, I'm not going to talk about it way. I think there's something of the mythologizing of that relationship with Sam is to do with the kind of loss of friendship that he experienced.
Moving on, we got next chapter, Conspiracy Unmasked. We meet Merry, cross the ferry, and we arrive at Frodo's house at Crick Hollow. We get another song, which is Edward's favorite song, Singing for the Bath at Close of Day. And then this is where, I forgot to mention, Frodo's planning on leaving everyone else. I guess he's still taking Sam, but he doesn't know that everyone else knows the whole plan. And he reveals, or Merry reveals, that everyone else actually knows Frodo's plan, and Frodo doesn't really have a clue what's going on.
Yeah, Frodo's not bright, is he? Frodo's not the sharpest tool in the tool shed.
No. They do some debating and decide the best way to go is through the old forest. Fatty Bulger decides to stay at Crick Hollow, which to me is crazy. They know they got these black riders coming around, and everyone knows that's where Frodo's going, and Fatty Bulger's like, yeah, y'all go in the forest, I'll stay here.
Doesn't that make him the most badass, though?
I guess. He's a brave little hobbit.
He narrowly escapes them later on. It's, I guess the Booklanders sort of raise the alarm and drive off the riders. Even though, for hobbits, I don't know how that... But I guess it's just sort of that kind of symbolic thing. If they can muster their courage, they can drive the riders off at this point, since they're so weakened.
And let's see, the hobbits travel through the old forest, and they notice it's very strange. The path seems to move. The forest tries to block their way. And we get another song of wonders in the shadowed land. And then they have their encounter with Old Man Willow, and along comes Tom Bombadil, everybody's favorite. And there's multiple pages of songs and tunes with Tom Bombadil. And he rescues the hobbits, knocks on Old Man Willow, and sings to him, and he lets the hobbits go, and then we're off to Tom Bombadil's house.
Yeah, man. Do you guys think that, when the woods are not letting them pass, and in general all the kind of, earth stuff that's not being nice to them, do you think that's part of Sauron's influence on the world, or do you believe I think Gimli and Aragorn have this conversation and say there's evil and good that exists before Sauron and the Ring, then it's nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
I think it's just sort of malevolence from the natural world, not liking civilized people. I think that conversation is from the past of Caradhras, and I guess you get a little bit of that in Fangorn as well.
But was it really malevolent? I mean, I guess it is malevolent, but is it? It just seemed like
well,
it's
Old Man
just,
Willow certainly is.
Yeah, but I mean, it's two different races trying to, like they said, the hobbits had cut down trees and stuff at one time. You know what I mean? Is it just the forest defending itself?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, in the Council of Elrond, they say that a squirrel could go from tree to tree from Dunland to the borders of the old forest, and I guess there's a lot of resentment if there's memory in the forest that so much of it has been cut down to this like small little swath of trees.
And I guess Tolkien has sympathy with that, right? Because he stands for nature against cutting trees down and industrialization.
Yeah, but this kind of puts it on its head is where, are these trees evil, or is it just because they've been harassed so long that they become hard of heart? Does Tolkien sympathize with Old Man Willow, even though, his heart is all black and everything else? So there's definitely, more evil and malevolence in the world than just Sauron. So I guess now, so we're in the house of Tom Bombadil. And we talk more with him. We get to meet Goldberry, his wife, who he talks about, in the previous chapter that he's singing about. And, she has a really big influence on Frodo because he instantly goes in the song singing about her. So they go there, they take a bath again, and then they go to sleep. And what's interesting, I thought, was Frodo had this really bad dream that, in the house, and he thought it was black riders, but it was always like airborne kind of problems. It was, a mighty eagle sweeping down, bearing him away, the moon being, shadowed and everything else, where the black riders right now, at least we know them as just riders. They're not flying or anything. So I thought that was interesting, but also the fact that, Tom Bombadil's house was pretty much impregnable and everything. And there's a kind of dread in Pippin's dream, because he had one as well, of the forest coming in and trying to take the house. So they stay a couple days in the house, and then they take off, and from there they start walking through the Barrow Downs, which I think we heard about in The Hobbit. So this is kind of a realization of a dread that's, been building up a lot. And so as they're walking through, they start getting into a lot of fog, they get lost, and then they get captured by one of the Barrow Wights. This is actually interesting. I heard this on the Tolkien professors. A wight is not a ghost, like how people think about it before, but Tolkien was using it. I guess wight used to mean just a person, so this is just a Barrow person, not, a Barrow ghost. And
no, but it is a reanimated corpse, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the first time in literature it's been used to refer to an undead person, I think.
Right.
But well, I mean, I'm sure there's like a passage somewhere where it says that like dark shadows, darker spirits came from Angmar and went into the bones of the Dunedain and made them move again and walk again.
Is that so? I guess I was confused because I thought that maybe they were similar to the writers, where they had never died and they were staying in they were conformed to their barrows.
No, they're not the Dunedain themselves, because they were the good guys. They just passed on when they died, and they were like dark spirits that reanimated the corpses that became the Wights. So they're not like ghosts in the traditional sense.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, thanks. So they go there. As they're being stuck, Frodo is able to slip out, and he's able to call Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil comes bouncing across the thing. And I thought it was interesting in the Old Forest. For me, as a kid, and up until I just finished rereading it, I always thought of Tom Bombadil as this like Tom lanky guy. instead he was, described as, kind of short and chubby, which I thought was really interesting. Especially because Robin Williams originally was rumored to play him in the movies. Would have been funny to see. So...
Would have been terrible.
But yeah, it would have been awful. The whole Tom Bombadil thing would have been totally ridiculous to put in that film.
Yeah. It is totally ridiculous in the book as well. I mean, it's based on a children's poem or something that Tolkien made up for his kids, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
in 1934, there's a lot of material from stuff he did earlier in the first book. I guess because he was still figuring out what the plot was and he had lots of material to use. But yeah, it just feels really weird and out of place. It's almost like from The Hobbit, like with trolls and stuff, like more of the kind of the children's stuff. I have very little patience with it.
So, I guess, do you guys not like Tom Bombadil?
I mean, I'm not anti-Tom Bombadil. He's a nice guy. Off he goes. But I just don't think the Tom Bombadil and Goldberry stuff to me in the story. I think there's an important point that you'd want them as characters, which is for Tolkien to say, look, there are forces in this world that are very part of the earth and that exist before the evil that elves forged with the rings, and that Tom Bombadil, he's immune to the ring, but he can't keep the ring and keep it safe because Sauron could just burn. I like that whole kind of concept of what is evil in the ring and who can and can't be contagious to it. But you don't need to spend that long. It just seems like a kid's book. So yeah, I was really, one of the key changes in the movie that I really approved of was just saying, okay, what is the narrative? Where is the plot? Let's get on with it. Let's get to Strider because that's key.
Yeah, I found it much more interesting when Gandalf talked about Tom Bombadil than the actual parts with Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, do you guys have any crackpot theories about what is Tom Bombadil? I mean, is it like a spirit of the forest or just a old dude, or what is it?
If anyone's actually got through the Silmarillion, he's one of the... He's basically a spirit like the same sort of spirit that Gandalf is, but he was one of the first to enter the world after it got made.
He's almost like a Mother Nature figure, right? But I'm interested, because how is it that he's kind of immune to the ring, but Gandalf and Galadriel and those guys aren't? Like,
I think that's like
Gandalf could be tempted, right? Or can Gandalf not be tempted by the ring?
I think that has something to do with the Old Forest. I mean, I think there's a passage that says that he sort of shut himself in, that his power only extends to the borders of the Old Forest, and he made that decision himself, that he sort of sanctified the land, I guess, that he's master there.
Also, Gandalf, he's susceptible to the ring because he's no longer in his original form. He took a human form. So he kind of like gave up some of his power. All 5 of the Astari, which was Saruman, Radagast, Gandalf, and the 2 blue wizards, they all came over, and they aren't Anar, which is what they were before, which were kind of a level of angel almost. And so they gave up a lot of their power, so they're more susceptible to, I guess, human issues. Whereas I don't think Bombadil gave up that. He's still in his original form. So I also think I enjoy him because, and I understand, it's very different, but I think just the joy that he and Goldberry bring, especially at the point in the story where it's very doom and gloom, like they're being chased, they're, being stuck. And so the entire part of the story is all, there can only be failure, and there's, this dark storm coming.
Okay, I've got a question. There's so much talk about Tom Bombadil. What is Goldberry?
I thought she was like a spirit of the water, like Lady of the Lake in King Arthur. She's like a...
Just kind of
she's called River daughter. Yeah, I mean, River woman's daughter, she's called, I think, so.
So in the grand scheme of things, she's inconsequential. She's just Tom Bombadil's girlfriend.
Yeah, maybe the spirit of the river in the Old Forest, with the window or whatever.
That's one hell of a pickup line, isn't it? Like, go out with me, chick. I'm like a spirit of the earth.
But isn't the original, like, there's a book called The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. He, like, kidnaps her, basically, just drives into the river and wrestles her out of there and drags her home or something.
What? Tom Bombadil's a racist?
Yeah, I think that might have been changed for the Lord of the Rings, but I'm pretty sure that's in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, and Tolkien says, or he implied, I don't think he specifically said it, that he just liked the two characters, and so the Tom Bombadil and Goldberry that are in Lord of the Rings is not the same characters as they were in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil. I guess he just really liked the names, and he really liked the people that they were, the characters that they were. And so instead of inventing a completely new character, he's just like, oh, well, I like these guys, I'm going to throw them in. I think Farmer Maggot is as well. So, like, getting to favorite songs, I always like, so after Frodo sings the songs and Tom Bombadil's coming and everything, one of my favorite images of this is when he comes and saves them, and he sings the song, Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. None has ever caught him yet, for Tom he is the master. His songs are stronger songs, and his feet are faster. And I always thought that was, like, cool, because, you know, you've got this guy coming, and he's pretty much just like, no one can beat me, I'm awesome, and I also wear ridiculous clothes. And
it's like a boast almost.
Yeah, exactly. So
He's kind of like Samuel L. Jackson, like, I'm Tom Bombadil, I'm so awesome, I can wear stupid clothes, and I'm still a badass.
yeah, exactly.
Actually, kind of like the White song that they sing just before Tom comes in. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, I think they gave that to Gollum in Two Towers film, but it's sort of just creepy and sort of really melancholy. I like it.
Yeah. And what's funny is if you look at the songs too, like the song that he uses against the White, he pretty much takes the White song and then flips it onto him, and he tells the White, "Oh, you want it to be cold and dark? All right, fine, go away. You know, I don't want it to be cold and dark, and I'm the master." So after that,
so I've got a question.
Oh yeah.
Did they really not tell it was a barrow before the rest of their? It was pretty obvious. It had the stone that all the other barrows had. It was a different sort of mountain. And they had the warning from Tom Bombadil where he said, you know, go from the west, not from the east. And they just went and sat down on the east. Shouldn't they just have taken like a safer option and sat on the west, you know, even if they weren't sure if it was a barrow or not?
Well, I guess there's some like sort of mind control magic going on in the barrow dance. I mean, they take a nap, they sit to take a break against that one cold stone and they fall asleep.
Yeah, but they sit on the east side.
Nothing good comes from the east.
It's pretty clearly mentioned, you know, they sit on the east side of the stone.
Didn't a big mist come and they couldn't tell?
But that was after they sat down, that was after they sort of tried to pass it on the east side instead of the west. That's when the mist started to come up.
Yeah, it was a schoolboy error.
Yeah, they should have. I think it comes down to their hobbits, and they still haven't figured out, you know, there's danger too. But yeah, schoolboy error.
Yeah, and we need them to be naive at this stage because we need to see the impact of real danger and hanging around with Strider and getting schooled on them. You know, we need them to be a little bit credulous at this point.
So we get to Bree, and there's some history about Bree and how there's hobbits and men living there. And I thought it was really interesting. In The Hobbit, they don't talk about Bree, right? Does anyone remember?
Yeah, well, it's outside the shire, so they don't really give a damn.
So they sit down, they get to the prancing pony, there's a lot of talk, they find out that there's a lot of problems still going on in the world, and that there's men, local hobbits, dwarves, and all these other people. And that's when Frodo meets Strider, who seems, at this point, very shady, and you know, you almost wonder if he's one of the bad guys, which I think is really well done in the book and in the movie. And so they go down, but then Frodo starts singing. And I thought the song that he sung was really interesting because, I mean, at least as a kid, I always knew, like, hey diddle diddle, Jack and the Fiddle, that whole thing. But to read it extended, I thought it was really interesting to see. And as he's singing, he accidentally puts his ring on. Everyone thought he disappeared, which he did. And so later on, they get up to their room. Strider talks to them, and it's not until Butterbird comes up with a letter from Gandalf that the innkeeper should have delivered months ago, saying that they should trust Strider and make for Rivendell. He gives them a way to make sure that they know, the Strider is the right guy. And then they sit down, they talk, and Strider seems to be more personal then. It was at that point that Mary walks in, and Mary had went for a walk after dinner, and he had found Black Riders were in the town, and they were concerned now that they were going to be captured. And so there's some interesting things here I found. Mary fell asleep, and Strider, very strangely, on the side of the road, and Strider tells them that it was because the riders have a power called the Black Breath. And that's all that's ever come of it. Mary says, fell into a queer, deep sleep, and he had an ugly dream. And Strider says, oh, I know what that is. That's the Black Breath.
Did anyone think at this point of the books how weak the riders were?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that. Because, these riders, Mary asks if they'll attack the inn. And, this is just an inn that's run by hobbits. It's not the biggest thing. And Strider says things like, they're not all here yet, and that's not their way, and it's dark and loneliest is the way, and they won't openly attack a house where there are lights and many people.
Yeah,
they don't seem very powerful at this time.
It's very contradictory, the information we get about them.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting how there's, men in the town, like Bill Fennery, who he, tells the writers about Frodo, that there's, this dude that lives in Bree, and he's, fraternizing with the, Black Riders. I mean, that's strange, but I guess there's men in the armies of the enemy anyway, but it's just that guy lives there, and he's, hanging out with hobbits, and he's talking to this monster, and just for gold, I guess.
But it just seems basically that at this point their powers are sniffing hobbits out on the side of the road and being just put off by the slightest kind of camouflage or mask.
No, I think they paralyzed Merry with the Black Breath because they were going to carry him off, and then the hobbit servant guy from the inn came upon them and just basically
another little hobbit.
Yeah, but they got scared by a hobbit, so they can't be that strong.
Yeah. It was hey, what are you guys doing? And he went, oh shit, let's bail.
Yeah.
And yet by the end they're really absolutely, as ring wraiths, they're absolutely scary. So is it that their power increases as Sauron's power and forces increase, or I don't know, why are they so weak early on? Or is it just at this point it's still a bit more of a children's story written in the manner of The Hobbit and gets more serious and scary as the story goes on?
I think it's down to they're almost an embodiment of fear at this point, and they're not actually fearsome. And so as long as you are afraid of them, then they're a problem. But once you're not afraid of them, once you show any kind of courage, they kind of have to back off. And
but even in a few chapters, Glorfindel, says I can't stand against them when they're together.
Well, all 9 of them, yeah. But
I can't stand, or something like even Aragorn and Glorfindel can't stand against them when they're on horse. That's just the horses are real. They would be ridden down.
But even when they're on horse, so you go to the next chapter in A Knife in the Dark, and they talk about, Fatty Bulger, who was waiting for them, and when they came to the house, they raised all of the bucklands, and, they're bringing out horns, and people are calling and everything, and then the riders just run away. And so I feel like as long as they're not all together, not all 9 of them, as long as you show any kind of courage, they kind of go away, which is weird because, later on these guys are scary. So from there, they realize that they are actually, the riders are in Bree, and so they sleep in another place, and they find out, the next day that they were attacked. So the riders did attack them. And so there's a lot of talk about how, Butterbur was really embarrassed by this, and he was able to get them one horse, and he was able to give them some money and everything, and then they go off to Riverrun.
Riverrun?
No. Rivendell. Yeah. Well, there's a slip.
I think it's interesting how they passed that guy who sold them out to the writers, and they just throw an apple at him, and it's like, you asshole. I mean, I guess they couldn't, like, turn him into the cups or anything like that.
Sam, when he sees someone who just tried to kill them pretty much, his only instinct is to throw an apple at him, because, that's kind of how you would deal with things, I guess, in the Shire. So,
well, they know when they don't know,
Yeah. They're going on to Rivendell. They're being chased a lot. There's a lot of, description where they don't get lost, but they're going through a lot of different places. And then they get to Weathertop, and they sit around Weathertop. They realize that Gandalf was at Weathertop previously, where it seems like he was fighting. So this is an interesting thing about the writers, is that Gandalf was attacked by the writers by himself, and Gandalf's much stronger, and he was able to ward them off using lightning and stuff. The town of the Bucklanders were able to do it by blowing the horn and running around screaming. So
it makes sense. I mean, Gandalf, he has the Elven Ring of Fire, doesn't he? I mean, that's basically his go-to magic thing. He just conjures fire whenever, and the riders are weak to fire.
But he doesn't use the Ring of Fire as an offensive weapon, though, does he?
Well, doesn't it give him, like, power or something, shouldn't it?
It's supposed to light the fire in the hearts of men, right?
Yeah.
To inspire.
Well, maybe I just thought it in, like, RPG terms, like +6 fire damage or something.
I always thought like his offensive magical powers were kind of inherent to him, not part of that ring.
Yeah, the Elvish rings are more motivational.
But it just sort of feels like you get as much power from the ring as it gets from you, kind of like a virtuous or vicious circle.
Right.
Like the ring definitely enables you to do stuff in a way that you otherwise wouldn't, but that you infuse it also with your power and goodness or otherwise.
Is that why the hobbits disappear when they put on the ring? I mean, it's said that the hobbits are really good at hiding and they pass by unseen very well.
Yeah.
Does Isildur disappear when he puts on the ring, though?
Yeah, he did as well.
I guess that's flaw in that theory then. Yeah.
But Sauron didn't.
And Smeagol is kind of they're related to hobbits in a way, isn't he? He's a kind of a hobbit.
Yeah, he's an early one of the early hobbits.
Does he actually predate the Shire?
Yeah,
How old is Gollum?
He's over 500 years old.
And Shire is 300 years old, I think.
Something like that.
So they're at Weathertop. They realize that they are starting to be surrounded by the writers, able to keep them mostly off, but Frodo becomes, very scared, and he wants to put on the ring. And he actually does put on the ring, and then he sees the writers there advancing on him, and one of them attacks him, and then Strider and everyone else was able to get them off using, fire and wood and stuff.
Did they really have to go to Weathertop? I mean, Aragorn describes it as this vantage point where probably the Black Riders will go to as well to see if they have taken that route. So why go there at all?
Yeah, isn't it just tactically really idiotic to go and put yourself on the...
Yeah, I mean, you're standing on this peak where anyone can see you from miles around. Fine, you can see around as well, but they'll see you too.
Did he have to see
trying to get
Gandalf
away from them? But why? Just why not make for Rivendell the fastest, in the fastest way you can?
Well, I guess hindsight is 20/20.
I guess.
But, Aragorn points it out. The Black Riders will come this way as well. So why go there then?
I think there wasn't a whole lot of options going to Rivendell, right? There was kind of one main way, and Weathertop was on the way.
But it just sort of feels like you don't need to make your camp on it. It's like, why not make your camp at the base of it where you're less conspicuous?
Well, they did. I mean, they only went to the top to have a look, and then they came down and they were in a dell near the base, and that's where the riders came upon them.
Oh, okay. So basically my memory of the film is crowding out my memory.
Yeah.
Where they literally start, cooking sausages on top. Yeah. Okay.
No, they're in like a...
Aragorn suggests that they light a fire. I know, I've seen the movies many, many times, and I've read the book, after 12 years. So, I was surprised too, in the movies they pretty much blame Pippin and Merry for, inviting the Black Riders in, but actually Aragorn is the one that suggests they light a fire because it'll help keep the Black Riders away.
Yeah, but it's only a last resort, lighting the fire, and it's not like a bumbling thing, like in the film. I think.
Okay, so they're not as idiotic as...
Basically, because in the books, the Black Riders can't really see in the way that we see. They sort of see shadows.
I think it's interesting, like, comparing to the film, how in the book, basically, the Frodo putting on the ring basically caused him getting stabbed, because he went invisible to his party as well. And not
but
just
here
like...
as well, even in the books, it's the same. You know, as soon as he puts on the ring, the Black Riders can see him.
Yeah.
Or they can sense him that much more strongly.
Yes, but the witch
attack.
thing sort of just, he just sort of sneaked up on Frodo and stabbed him, and nobody was none the wiser. I mean, in the movie he does it like everyone else scatters and flees, and he's alone against the riders, and he uses it as a last resort. But in the book, everyone is still there, and there's the fire, and the ring rates just
but they've already sort of sneaked up, and Frodo is, by the presence of the Black Riders, he's just tempted to put on the ring, and he does, and suddenly the Black Riders can see him.
Oh, so you think that Frodo puts on the ring because being in the presence of the Black Riders?
Yeah, he suddenly starts feeling this pressure to put on the ring. He feels it every time the Black Riders come near, and this time he sort of succumbs to it, and suddenly they can see him and attack him.
Which brings up a really interesting question about the nature of free will. Like, you know, in what sense is Frodo a moral agent at this point?
I think that's actually a good point, because Sauron seems to be able to distort people and to make them do what he wants them to do. And the ring has that ability to do it. The ring pretty much makes Frodo put it on. And so, yeah, maybe there is no free will there. Or maybe you just have to have a strong, like, free will. It's not just free will, you have to have a strong mind and a free will.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Every time the Black Riders come close, the effect it has on Frodo, it sort of, makes him do stuff. Usually makes him put on the ring.
I actually read this kind of interesting book by a guy called Tom Shippey, who's also, I think he's also a professor of language like Tolkien. And he was talking about the evil of the ring and like this concept of free will maybe as the ring is a bit like an addiction, and you can have the resolve to not use, but if someone comes near you in a certain environment, it's going to be much more likely and much more tempting. And that the more you do it, the more addicted to it you become. So by the time, on his analogy, you get Smeagol, who becomes basically just a full-blown addict. And
correct.
Yeah, exactly. And that obviously different people have different susceptibilities to becoming an addict, and that would explain why maybe Bilbo and to a lesser extent Frodo are less susceptible than the men. And even Aragorn, Aragorn is in the presence of the ring much more than Boromir. But that once you start using, it's all about, how frequently you use and how that makes it worse. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out. It's probably one for later book discussions.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense. And it's really interesting. I mean, it will become more apparent later on, but just how well Tolkien is able to talk about it, addiction and everything else. Okay, so we get through, and then, so Frodo gets stabbed, and they're able to fight off the riders, and dawn appears, and the riders go away, but Strider knows that they'll come back in better numbers, and that Frodo is sick, and Strider is not going to be able to heal the wound. So they start walking through the forest, trying to get to Rivendell. And I thought, in a pretty cool shout out to the Hobbit, they come upon the trolls. And then at that point, they start hearing this horse coming up, and it turns out that it's not one of the Black Riders that's chasing down, but instead it's the elf Glorfindel. And so I really enjoy Glorfindel. I think he's like the first vamp in the show. Sorry, in the book, not the show.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of fun. I'm usually not a big fan of Tolkien's elves, but Glorfindel is definitely a badass.
It's awesome. And
Glorfindel's killed a Balrog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's totally badass.
And the thing that I liked about him was he was talking about Elrond send out all these people and everything, and Glorfindel says that he came to the writers. So and he pretty much just says like, oh well, I saw them and I chased them off, and he's just like,
it's like he says I chased them off and they withdrew.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, Gandalf, he had to use lightning. You guys had to, like, fight him off, and you guys didn't really do that good of a job. But, I just rode after them, and they're like, oh, here comes Glorfindel.
Yeah, like it ain't no thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't it always seem like Elrond didn't do a whole lot? Like, okay, he sent, like, three of them, right? One north, west, and south.
Yeah.
It's like, could you send 30?
Maybe he feels like one Glorfindel's worth like 30 normal peeps.
Yeah. How many people?
But send a few additional troops. It won't hurt.
Well, how many people of Glorfindel's caliber does Elrond have in Rivendell? I mean, none, right?
I guess maybe 3. The guys that he sent out.
Yeah, it actually says that, but the only 3 people who had the strength to face the Black Riders. But the hobbits have been facing them all along.
Yeah.
I kind of like him. I like Elrond as the sort of the ruler of elves in the Age of Austerity. I'm going to be really precise. I need precisely 3 men, 1 for each direction. I'm not making any waste. Do this thing.
Kind of a cool tidbit is that Glorfindel is actually the dude who makes the prophecy about the Witch King of Angmar, that by no living man will he be killed at the Battle of Fornost.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that he makes the prediction, but the prediction is just a weak rip-off of Shakespeare, isn't it? So.
Maybe this is a good time to bring it up. The nature of elves. I've read a lot of Tolkien and this stuff, and the nature of elves is still very ambiguous to me. I really don't understand a lot about it, how they walk in both worlds.
They're almost like half angels. I always thought of it after reading the Silmarillion. Because, like, you have the Vinar and the Inar, which were, I guess in the easiest way for me to deal with it is that they were angels sent down to, be caretakers and everything. And the elves were like them, but given mortality only in certain ways. And so they're kind of like half angels, which I guess makes sense.
Yeah, what
happens to an elf? In some instances, it seems like they do die, like when they refer back to the last lines of Elves and Men. But then in other instances, I think it's said that they don't really die.
I mean, Glorfindel dies and it's back.
Yeah, to take him as an example, when their body gets destroyed, but their spirits go west to Valimar, there's a place in Valimar called the Halls of Mandos, where I think it means the Halls of Waiting, where they can get another body. I think some don't. Some do, depending on what's happened to them. But Glorfindel's the only elf to have died and then come back to Middle-earth with another body.
Yeah, I think that's cool, but I think it's kind of a retcon, and Tolkien came up with that reincarnation thing only afterwards, like you talked about with Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, that he just liked those characters, so he threw them in there because there was. And then he just afterwards thought that this Glorfindel is the same Glorfindel as was in the Silmarillion.
Well, he's got the authority to do that because it's his.
Yeah, I mean, I like the change, but I just thought that was the theory behind it, or philosophy, I guess. It's the thing about the doom of men or the gift of men is that in this world, when men die, their spirits pass on. I guess just like in our world, and nobody really knows what happens to them. And elves, they just stay around until the end of the world. So I guess that's one of the reasons why the elves are more connected to the world and nature and everything, because they're essentially a part of it.
But so what's the meaning when they get in the boats and sail to the west? I mean, aren't they dying in some sense? I always thought that there was the tragedy of Weathertop for Frodo is he doesn't know this yet, but he may destroy the ring, but he'll never have the happy ever after. He'll end up basically never recovering and ultimately dying.
No, that's something I think that was sort of brought up by the movies. They draw a lot of parallels to the afterlife and the ship going, but the elves actually are physically going over the ocean to the other side, to the Undying Lands. Frodo and Bilbo and Gimli go there, they're just going to die, and what happens to hobbits and dwarves when they die is going to happen, so it's not going to be like...
So what's the point of going in the boat then?
Yeah.
Well, I guess...
they're going to be the same at the other end.
It's
like
still going to be like a magical place, so they're going to like it's going to heal their spirit, I guess, since they carried the ring and were sort of tainted by it.
Yeah, well, they're going to die of bliss, I think, is the term. Well, term described by the Tolkien professor once upon a time.
Yeah.
It's like choosing to go to paradise. You know.
Yeah, maybe that's the way.
Going to paradise and then dying.
I don't know if they die there though. I think they just live forever.
But that's amazing because that means that's mind bending for my interpretation of Lord of the Rings, because where I saw it as this sort of tragic sacrifice that Frodo had made, ultimately what you're saying is actually he's gained a kind of immortality in paradise, which is wonderful.
Oh, I'm
Frodo.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I listened to the Tolkien professor thing. I think that a lot of people, other than elves, when they go to the Undying Lands, they are going to die. But they're going to have some good time before that, maybe. But like, they are going to die, and like their spirit is going to pass on. If that happens with dwarves and hobbits, I'm not sure, because dwarves are supposed to reincarnate. I think at least they believe they are.
Yeah, but, I find it a fascinating topic. A friend of mine and I we were talking about it today, and saying that for such a devoutly religious man, it's kind of weird because in his novels there's not much explicit organized religion, and there's not much. It's very ambiguous, and I kind of like that actually.
It's sort of all in the background, especially when you've read Silmarillion.
Oh, the Silmarillion, the first, I guess, 50 pages, you could, if you had the Book of Genesis out and you read those pages, it's almost line by line if you read it. It's pretty interesting. I think, he's just, I think what he does is, as being, he took his religious beliefs and they're woven into the story, but not in, an organized religion way, which I really.
Yeah, it's elegant. I really love that.
There isn't really any religion in the world itself like we do get in A Song of Ice and Fire. It's like nobody really believes in anything. I guess there's this sort of kind of a reverence for the elves of old. Frodo knows the stories about, like, who's this Elbereth guy? I mean, I don't know, but I guess they have all stories that they sort of have a great reverence for, but I don't think there's like any temples or churches or anything like that.
So, Peter brought up a good question. Who is Elbereth?
Who is Elbereth? She is...
Oh, she.
She's the spouse of Manwë, who is like the big cheese in Varda, which is the Earth. So he's basically the number 2 to the god figure, who's called Iluvatar. So they're all in the west. They live on this big mountain. So, but the thing is, when they sit on their seats on this big mountain, Manwë can see everything, and Elbereth can hear everything. So when they say Elbereth, they're actually calling to her, saying, "Hear us over here. We're in trouble."
Kind of comical that it's sitting around there.
What did you say? So Manwë sees and Elbereth hears. So who actually helps the people?
Yeah,
that's so ruthlessly practical, Nadia. I love it.
I'm just wondering how this works.
No, that's why.
Otherwise, there's no point in calling.
The eagles are Manwë servants, so the eagles help them.
Oh, okay. But there are no eagles coming to help Frodo.
But that's why they sent Gandalf and the other 4 to be kind of their agents. So.
Yeah, and don't get me started on eagles.
Saruman,
that's another podcast.
Saruman works out really well.
I also like here that Glorfindel's the first elf that you kind of have to respect as well. Before everyone, the elves in the Hobbit were the tra-la-lolly elves.
And Gildor was kind of an asshole.
Yeah, Gildor, he's just like, oh, we like to party and, that kind of stuff, and, good luck on your quest. But Glorfindel's the first one to be like, hey, I'm here to help. Like, I'm here to, I can actually do something instead of sit around and play the harp and sing.
Which raises the interesting question of all the elves you're going to send in the Fellowship. Would you really have picked Legolas?
Yeah. Legolas.
Why not send Glorfindel?
Well, didn't he volunteer?
But this isn't a democracy. This is going to destroy the ring, It's like Elrond, come on, man.
This was in my chapter, Elrond is thinking about who he's going to, tells Frodo who he has picked, and then he says that there are 2 spots left, and the thing about who to send, like maybe Glorfindel, the Balrog Slayer, or maybe his sons, the renowned orc hunters. But then Pippin chimes up and he's like, but I want to come too! And then everyone says, okay, well, since you asked, okay, go along then.
Yeah, but that's bullshit. Like, and
Yeah.
why does it have to be 12? Okay, so Merry and Pippin are like, okay, we need to go too. But then maybe, despite that, Elrond's like, okay, fine, we make it a fellowship of, we'll put another person in, we'll make it a Balrog
It has to be 9 because there's 9 riders and it's symbolic and it's like neat. Everyone likes things to be neat.
Symbol schmimble. I want the Balrog killer.
Yeah.
So when we finish book 1, remind me, what's the actual hard stop? Like, 'cause
Yeah, Glorfindel gives his horse to Frodo, and Frodo rides off, so he crosses into Rivendell. The riders are there, they're trying to get him and everything, and then the river comes and washes them away, and then pretty much Frodo faints, and he heard and saw no more. And that's the end of the book.
That's kind of awesome how Frodo actually defies the ring rage and he stands up to them even though he's dying and puking his guts out and everything and just puts on the ring and waves his sword around.
So any kind of overarching thoughts on book 1? To me, it kind of felt a bit like The Hobbit, where there was this very clearly identifiable quest, which is get the ring to Elrond. They kind of achieved it by the end of this book, and it just felt very neat and contained, even though it took a while to get going. Like, it didn't really feel like, apart from Weathertop, that the real doom had made itself manifest. It felt still a bit like a children's book in some respects.
Sort of small in scope.
Yeah, it was actually kind of jarring reading this. When they reached Rivendell, I was like, nobody died.
Yeah.
And nobody important. And I've been reading so much Song of Ice and Fire recently, and it was weird not having anyone die.
No one died, no one got laid, no one got raped.
Yeah. It was so,
apart from the little
so
baby
black and white.
chickens that...
Yeah, maybe Goldberry.
Was it? Wait, what?
Well, you remember that the original story was that Tom Bombadil kidnapped Goldberry. Yeah, but I mean, I guess you said nobody important, but I guess they broke the gates at Bree and Buckland, but those were just red shirt hobbits and men, and we don't really see them, so yeah, definitely it's kind of
nobody
very
important
light.
dies.
They do have a little bit of hero armor in this book, it's true. So does anyone have any other kind of final thoughts on book 1 before we wrap up this first part of the Lord of the Rings discussion? Because I would have to say, from my perspective, it's not my least favourite of the books, because I think that is the second book of the next volume, but it just does take a while to wind up.
I think it's slow to get started.
Yeah. I mean, I guess after reading A Song of Ice and Fire, I have more appreciation for world building. And so going back and reading this, I just see it as world building. And so I actually like this flow, but I can also, as I was reading it, it's definitely, wow, this is a lot. So I can see both ways, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy it being, I enjoy the beginning in The Hobbiton, and I enjoy, the end of book 3 where they go back and there's that whole other ending after the big ending. Any time spent in the Shire I enjoy, so I don't mind it. I kind of like this, one of my favorite parts of the book.
If there's nothing further to add on book 1 of Lord of the Rings, I'd just like to thank everyone, Eddie, Peter, Nadia, Shane and Matt, for joining, and it's been a pretty detailed run through, but I just feel these books really deserve it, and it's been fun hearing everyone's different insights. So hopefully we will continue next time with book 2, and we will hear Peter's amazing chapter notes.
Oh, shit. Building them up too much now.
And,
The hype is there.
And hopefully I'll have read the whole book too by then.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm hoping that Eddie's going to have some cool impressions for us next time as well.
No, it's just Darkstar.
Just Darkstar. You've got to have some good... Lord of the Rings has 18 million characters. You've got to have one cool Brian Blessed does the Lord of the Rings character impression. No pressure. Cool. Okay, well, thanks everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thanks. It was fun.
Bye.
Bye.